Security is at issue this week in the civil trial involving families of the victims of the Aurora Movie Theater shooting and Cinemark, the company that owns the theater. The lawsuit claims that theater workers failed to properly secure the building and could have ultimately prevented the shootings. Kevin Taylor, attorney for the Cinemark theaters, claims that the theater could not have foreseen the attack. Eric, what do you think of the civil lawsuit now against the theaters?
I think as little as you can imagine about this civil lawsuit. Our hearts continue to go out to these families and the grief that will be part of their life forever. But this lawsuit strikes me as symptomatic of a country that is overly involved in litigation, overly litigious. There's a great book 20 years ago, The Death of Common Sense, about how we, informative for me, about how as a society we have turned so many issues over to trial lawyers and the reign of trial lawyers. How could any theater company, there was not a specific threat. No one called up and said or sent a note and made a threat against this theater. How could this have been reasonably foreseen? And I think that's the ultimate issue before the judge and the jury. I would hope the judge might make a summary judgment and just ditch this thing for lack of merit. But this is a search for a deep pocket, is a search for whenever something bad happens, somebody has to pay. And let's go find a deep pocket who can pay. But if this suit and other suits like it are successful, think of what life becomes like, just routine life, where not only is it TSA when you have to get on, when you want to get on an airplane, but it's that same kind of procedure when you want to go to a shopping mall, go see a movie, go check out a book at the library, whatever it is. That's the road we're heading down if this kind of lunacy really takes a foothold.
Ramsey, do you think other theaters are looking at this case, even if it fails, as looking at a reason to adjust their policies?
I think not just theaters, but I mean, like you said, I mean, it's restaurants, it's malls. If you have this sort of liability aspect, and, you know, reading through what's been going on in the trial, you know, saying, well, you should have had more security guards. You knew it was going to be a big thing. It's that sort of, you know, hindsight is 20/20. I feel that, I don't know whether or not people will start to change their policies, because whether you put a security guard doing it with a metal detector at the front of every movie theater, I just don't know if that would happen. But there could be a lot of ramifications from this, depending on how it goes, even if it fails, because there will be a lot of companies who are just terrified of what a lawsuit like this might do to them.
Patty, do you think most Coloradans look at this particular scenario and blame this on lack of security at a movie theater, or just the acts of a madman?
I don't think they're blaming the movie theater. And even before the lawsuit was filed, we saw public places and movie theaters around the state and around the country think about what they wanted to do. You know, some made it very clear guns weren't allowed, but everyone has looked at what they can do. But would it have made a difference if they even had a metal detector? The guy came in the side door, so maybe they could have had better security, but I think everyone really knows now that you just might not be safe anywhere, and that's really what the world is like now. It was interesting that there was a Homeland Security memo that wasn't allowed in that said that theaters might be targets of terrorists, but it wasn't allowed in because this wasn't an act of a terrorist, according to the judge. Then, in that, someone wrote a column that was great, comparing this to the math professor who was suspected of being a terrorist because he was writing math equations on an airplane.
David, you're attorney at the table. I'll hand it to you.
Well, it'll ultimately be decided by the Colorado Supreme Court if there's a jury verdict for the plaintiffs. And under traditional tort laws, part of the things you look at is the cost of various security measures versus their potential benefits. And it's possible the Colorado Supreme Court might come up with a mixed decision. For example, why not have alarms when the emergency door is open? That's how the criminal came in. That might be a low-cost thing. On the other hand, you have to have security guards at every theater, and this would also be really at every other public place as well. The court might say no on that. Ultimately, it's a decision that's better made by legislators. But it's also true that while public places like theaters or restaurants or whatever don't have an obligation affirmatively to protect you, they also have an obligation not to affirmatively create conditions of danger. And Cinemark did that with its no licensed guns policy, where they disabled people who had carry permits from being able to protect themselves and others.